A woman boards a plane, takes one look at the man sitting next to her, and refuses to sit down. Not because of a medical issue, not because of a mistake, but because the man is black. What happens next shocks the entire cabin, goes viral around the world, and turns one man's quiet dignity into a powerful message about race, respect, and what it truly means to take a stand while sitting down. Please like and subscribe to my channel if you found something interesting. I will bring more stories for you. Excuse me, I think there's a mistake. I can't sit here. That sentence was quiet, but it pierced through the calm like a thunderclap. Flight 227 from Houston to Atlanta was preparing for takeoff on what should have been a normal Tuesday morning. Passengers were finding their seats, overhead bins were closing, and flight attendants moved up and down the aisle with practiced efficiency. There was nothing unusual about this flight, until one woman decided that sitting next to a black man was unacceptable. Deborah Allen, well-dressed and sharply spoken, seemed like someone who had flown more times than she could count. She boarded early, holding her first-class boarding pass like it was a trophy. But as she reached her assigned seat, her attitude shifted. In 2A, sitting quietly and scrolling through his phone, was Marcus Green, a 33-year-old tech developer, heading home from a conference. Marcus wasn't doing anything unusual. He simply greeted her with a polite smile. And that was all it took to make Deborah recoil. The moment she refused to sit, everything began to spiral, first into discomfort, then confrontation, and finally, into a moment that would echo far beyond the cabin walls. This wasn't just about two seats on a plane. It was about something deeper, something we all needed to see. Deborah Allen's tone wasn't loud at first. It was more of a sharp whisper, low enough to seem polite, but clear enough to let everyone nearby hear. The words she used were vague. "I'm not comfortable," and "Can I be reseated?" But the meaning behind them was painfully obvious. The flight attendant tried to accommodate. She looked down at Deborah's boarding pass and checked the seat map on her tablet. Unfortunately for Deborah, Flight 227 was fully booked, with no open seats in any cabin. She explained that to Deborah gently, hoping it would defuse the situation. Instead, it made things worse. "I'm not asking. I'm telling you, I won't sit there," Deborah said, her voice getting sharper. She took a step back from the seat and folded her arms, refusing to move. Marcus glanced up. He had removed his headphones by now and was watching the situation unfold with quiet confusion. This wasn't the first time he had felt the sting of racial bias, but the directness of this moment caught him off guard. "I can switch seats if it helps," Marcus offered calmly, trying to avoid confrontation. But the attendant shook her head. "Sir, you haven't done anything wrong. You don't need to move." Deborah scoffed. "It's not about him. It's about me and my comfort." By now, passengers nearby were paying full attention. Phones were being discreetly pulled out. Some watched in shock, others in frustration. One older woman whispered to her husband, "Is this really happening in 2025? Deborah's refusal to sit wasn't just personal anymore, it was public. And the flight hadn't even left the gate. What struck people the most in the cabin wasn't Deborah's words, it was Marcus's silence. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue or accuse. He just sat there, holding his backpack in his lap, looking more disappointed than surprised. Marcus Green wasn't new to this kind of tension. Growing up in the South, he'd seen how subtle racism could be, how it shows up in sideways glances, clutched purses, or overly long stares in elevators. But this was different. It was loud, open, embarrassingly blatant. The flight attendant tried again to convince Deborah to sit, but she refused to even look at Marcus. "Is this airline seriously forcing me to sit in a situation that makes me feel unsafe?" she snapped. At that moment, a passenger 2 rows back stood up. His name was Raul Jimenez, a firefighter from Houston on his way to visit family. "Ma'am," he said, "no one is unsafe here. You're just being rude." That simple defense lit a spark. More passengers started to murmur in agreement. One woman leaned into the aisle and said, "Why don't you take another flight if you've got a problem?" The tension was rising fast. But Marcus remained still. In his mind, he debated whether to speak up or stay silent. Was it worth it? Would they twist his words? Would he be labeled as aggressive? Eventually, he looked at the flight attendant and said, "I'm not here to argue with her. I just want to get home." It was the kind of quiet dignity that makes people uncomfortable, because it leaves no excuse for bad behavior. And it left the airline with a decision to make. By now, the situation had reached the cockpit. The captain was informed, and the flight crew was growing concerned. Not just because of Deborah, but because of the delayed departure and the energy in the cabin. After a brief meeting in the galley, the captain stepped out. Tall, calm, and in full uniform, he walked directly to row 2. "Good morning," he began. "I understand we're having a bit of trouble getting seated." Deborah stood straighter, confident this was her moment to be heard. "Yes, I'm being asked to sit in a seat I'm not comfortable with. I'd like to speak with a supervisor." The captain nodded slowly. "You're speaking with the person in charge now. I need to be clear. Refusing to take your seat is a violation of federal regulations. If you're unable or unwilling to comply, we'll have to ask you to deplane." Her jaw dropped. "You're siding with him?" "No, ma'am. I'm siding with our policies. And our passengers deserve to be treated equally, regardless of who they are." The words hit the cabin like a wave. Applause broke out in first class. Even some coach passengers, overhearing the commotion, began to clap. Deborah looked around, realizing she had no support, and for the first time, she looked embarrassed. "I want a refund," she muttered, grabbing her handbag. "You'll receive one," the captain replied. As she was escorted off the plane, the mood shifted. Relief, pride, and maybe a little bit of hope settled over the passengers. It wasn't just about Marcus. It was about what was right. Within hours, social media had exploded. Videos from passengers filled TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Each clip told the same story. A woman refused to sit next to a black man, and the airline chose to stand by him. The story was clear. The message even clearer. The hashtag started trending. Hashtag flying while black, hashtag Marcus deserves better, hashtag racist on board, hashtag we stand with Marcus. One video of Marcus quietly sitting with his hands folded had over 4 million views in a single day. The comments flooded in. "The grace this man showed is incredible. I hope he knows how many people are behind him. It's not just a seat. It's about human dignity." Mainstream media picked it up fast. Morning shows invited Marcus to speak. News anchors debated the meaning of the incident. Activists weighed in. Pilots and flight attendants from other airlines praised the crew for standing their ground. At first, Marcus stayed quiet. He didn't want fame. He just wanted to move on. But 3 days later, he posted a video from his living room. "I didn't expect this attention. I just wanted to go home. But since the world's listening now, let me say this. We're tired. Tired of being treated like less. I'm not angry. I'm exhausted. And I hope this moment makes someone think twice before judging someone by their skin." That video was shared by celebrities, educators, athletes, and civil rights organizations. What started in one airplane seat had now reached millions. In the days that followed, Marcus received hundreds of messages. Some were from strangers, thanking him for his calm. Others came from people who shared their own stories of being mistreated, dismissed, or ignored. One message stood out most. It came from a teacher in Chicago. "My students watched your video. We had a whole class discussion about it. You've done more for them in 2 minutes than any textbook." Marcus realized then that this wasn't just a viral moment. It was a teaching moment. Airlines issued new training directives. Some even pledged diversity reviews. One airline started a campaign called Every Seat Matters, aimed at promoting inclusivity on board. As for Marcus, he returned to work, quietly. But everywhere he went, people recognized him. At airports, restaurants, even on his daily commute, people thanked him, not for speaking out, but for staying true to himself. Deborah Allen, on the other hand, disappeared from the spotlight. Reports suggested she was suspended from her job, but she never made a public apology. Maybe she didn't need to. Her actions had already spoken loud enough. But the louder voice was the one that remained calm. The one that stayed seated with dignity. The one that, without ever raising it, made the whole world listen. Flight 227 finally took off that day, 2 hours late. But it landed with something more powerful than any schedule. A story that reminded the world who we are and who we still need to become. Because a seat on a plane should never come with conditions. And respect? That should be standard, not optional. Marcus Green flew home that day. But in many ways, he helped the rest of us move forward, too.